What's up, you guys? I'm Eric and welcome back to my channel. No, you grow up. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the transition period from when the Turtles went from being my favorite property to when the X-Men became my favorite property. You're going to start to hear about some people that will probably come up in a lot of my videos. Kids that I played with, like at the babysitters and that like lived on my block and stuff like that. Just kind of some of the people that had influences on me and kind of the stuff that I got into. Don't really have a whole lot to say before this one, so we can jump right into it.
Star Wars is typically credited for being the line that sparked the action figure boom of the 80s and early 90s. It pretty much blew the entire field out of the water until Motu, G.I. Joe, and Transformers came along and sparked the greatest era of boys' toys we've ever seen. These properties ruled the 80s, each having their own moments in the sun until the end of the decade when a new challenger would emerge that would own the next 5 years that spilled from the late 80s into the early 90s. Star Wars needed the movies for success. Motu was about to take a nosedive, and G.I. Joe and Transformers would limp into the 90s after jumping the shark with their movies. These lines were dying, and the Turtles were catching fire, and fast. The Turtles quickly moved into a position with no peers and pretty much stayed that way until the Power Rangers came to the US in '93 and became the new boys' toys juggernaut. But for me, the Turtles were already on borrowed time when the Power Rangers came to town. Even though I was pretty into Power Rangers when their day came, they were still always just a high-ranking sideline for me and never really moved into that #1 spot that the Turtles have been holding down for my entire life up to that point. There was actually another property that was starting to slowly work its way up in my rankings, and by the end of '93, the Turtles were no longer my top dog. Looking at my thumbnail, or the title of this video, or after watching my intro, it should come as no shock to you that the X-Men would be the ones to finally take down my beloved Turtles, and they would hold down that #1 spot until the twilight of my toy years. Growing up, both of my parents worked, so from my preschool to my early elementary years, I spent most of my day at the neighborhood babysitters. I was the youngest kid there until my little brother would come along, but there was another kid there, Pat, who was a year older than me, who I considered to be my first friend, along with my cousin Jeff. These were my first two playmates, and since they were both older than me, they were pretty much responsible for getting me into all my childhood loves. Ironically, both of them had the same top two toy lines, Turtles and Joes, so, to no one's surprise, they both became my top two lines as well. The Turtles became my favorites immediately. I had a ton of Joes, and I always considered them to be my main sideline, and I would eventually start getting into other lines as well, like the real Ghostbusters, Transformers, and Batman, but none of them would ever come close to dethroning the Turtles. They would pretty much hold down the top spot from when I was at least 3 to 6. But one day, some new kids moved to my block, and eventually I started hanging out with one of them. His name was Josh. He was 3 years older than me, but for whatever reason, he always let me pal around with him like a little sidekick. I was the kind of kid that always wanted to do what the older kids were doing. He was into all this stuff that I had seen from afar, but never really knew anything about or had gotten to experience for myself. But the thing he was into that intrigued me the most were the X-Men. I had seen these comics on the racks next to Spider-Man and Batman, but that stuff just seemed so out of my league. But Josh showed me that it wasn't. He had a ton of the action figures, a ton of the trading cards, and he would tell me about everyone's backstories, and I felt like I knew everything about these characters without ever reading one of the comics myself. I couldn't get enough of these guys. I still loved the Turtles, they were still my main line, but when I went to Josh's, I always left those figures home because I was dying to play with his X-Men figures. Within a couple months of me learning all this stuff, X-Men the Animated Series debuted, as if fate was giving me the green light that this property was meant for me. The animated series was like nothing else I was watching. It was so hardcore compared to the Turtles. Their missions were serious, they had weight. They lost a main character in the first episode, or so we were made to believe. Clearly I didn't know enough about the X-Men to know that Morph was created just for the purpose of being off in the first episode, but to me, I thought a main character just got killed and it blew my mind. I was quickly drawn to Wolverine for obvious reasons. I've always been a Raph guy, I'm always drawn to the rebels, the badass loners who always leave whenever people beg them not to leave. Josh was always cool and let me be Wolverine whenever we played with his figures. He would also be the first person to give me my first X-Men figure on my 6th birthday, which would become the catalyst for the brand taking over my childhood. I'm one of those lucky kids that have a late March birthday, which, if you don't know, is when all 3 of the original Turtles movies were released in '90, '92, and '93. So if you were born at this time in the mid or late '80s, there was a good chance that this is how you wanted to spend your birthday weekends. I invited Josh to see The Secret of the Ooze with me the year before, so I invited him to see the 3rd movie with me that year as well. He gave me my present right before we left, and I can't explain to you how excited I was when I opened it. It was a Weapon X Wolverine Toy Biz figure, and to me it was just a Wolverine figure. I don't remember when I got my first turtle. The furthest I can remember back I had all 4 turtles and Krang, but I remember the day I got this first X-Men figure. I remember exactly where I was standing in my dining room when I opened it. I remember exactly how excited I was. I finally had my own X-Men figure, and it quickly became my tag-along figure anywhere I went. A lot of people say that the third movie is when their love of the turtles started to wane, and it was a pretty similar situation for me as well. I loved that movie the day I saw it. I got all 4 of the Turtle Samurai figures from that movie, but they were some of the last turtle figures that I would ever get. As I got more and more X-Men figures, I started playing with my turtles less and less. And by the end of '93, I was pretty much done with turtles, and X-Men were officially my new jam. I was in on the trading cards, the action figures, I was picking up some comics, I was Wolverine for Halloween that year, and it was pretty much all X-Men all the time now. It just felt so much more grown up to me than the Turtles did. I felt like I'd moved on to more of a big kid brand. My brother Josh, not to be confused with my neighbor Josh, is about 4 years younger than me, so he was never really in on Turtles with me, but he was in on X-Men, which is awesome because it pretty much doubled the amount of figures we had. Looking back on checklists in the archives, I think we had pretty close to half the figures. It's crazy when I look back on this line and see how random, no pun intended, that some of their choices were. I can't imagine we're ever going to get Killspree, Cruel, or Ahab in the Marvel Legends line anytime soon. And they gave us 2 Kane figures. 2 Kane figures. The dude who shoots fists at people. Wolverine and Cable both got a million versions, but other than those 2, not many characters got more than a couple. I feel like the depth of this line is really underestimated when compared to other classic lines. The female characters were criminally underrepresented, but that was kind of the style at the time with most boys lines. These days, I'm getting my fix with Marvel Legends like most people, but I will be going for the Toy Biz line sometime in the future. It's not my childhood original, but I do have my first Weapon X figure that I got for my birthday, and the first edition Cable figure, and just having those 2 figures is enough to remind me of all the wonderful times that I've had with this line, for now anyway. The X-Men are still my second favorite property under the Turtles, and even though the Turtles are way ahead of everything else, the X-Men are still head and shoulders above the rest of the pack as well. They don't mean quite as much to me as the Turtles do, but they mean a lot. The X-Men dethroned the Turtles is my reigning champ, and there was only one more property that would ever hold that title, but that's a story for another day. Alright you guys, that's going to wrap things up for this video. I have a lot more to say about the X-Men, about the original Toy Biz toy line, the comics. I know this is probably going to be a very turtle heavy channel, but I will talk about other things on here from time to time. I do have a lot of interest, and again, the X-Men are something else that is very, very important to me. Thank you all for watching my videos. Thank you for all the subscribers that have been here for a while, and thank you for all the new subscribers. So again, every time I do these voiceovers, I have a lot more new people to thank, so welcome everyone to the channel. If you guys ever have anything to say, please feel free to say it, even if you disagree with me. I just recently had somebody have a pretty good rebuttal to one of my videos, and I loved it. Again, there's a difference between someone forming a well thought out argument and coming at me, and I will respect that. But if you just come at me with something like Rise is trash and you suck, like, clearly that's not an argument, you know what I mean? So again, we're always open for debate here. As long as things are kept healthy and friendly, feel free to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Feel free to talk amongst each other. That's what I want this channel to do. I want it to spark conversation. And I love that you guys are like doing that with me, but again, feel free to do it with each other. Jump in, you know what I mean? And yeah, like, that's all I really got for you guys. I'm still having a ton of fun doing this. So yeah, just be safe, take it easy, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.